Hello everyone. In this today's session, we are going to study about something more interesting on the topic reproduction. I'll show you two images. Just find the difference between the two. This is the first image and this is the second image. Yes, the difference between the two is if you see the first image, only one parent is giving rise to two new offsprings or two new cells, or you can say two new individuals. Whereas if you see the second image, here only two parents are giving birth, come together and give birth to a new offspring. Okay, so here two individuals are required, and here only one individual is required. Hence, on the basis of this, there are two types of reproduction. The first method is said to be sexual reproduction, whereas the second method is said to be asexual reproduction. Yes, here is a difference between the two types of reproduction, sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. The first point we already discussed in sexual reproduction. Every organism which reproduces requires two parents, one male, another female. Every organism which reproduces sexually requires two parents, one male, another female, whereas in asexual reproduction, one single organism can give rise to two daughter cells. Now, if you have looked at the image or if you have observed the image very carefully, you might have seen it was written daughter cells in asexual reproduction. So, someone might be thinking why it is not son cell. Is it always there are only female cells being produced? So, it is a topic or this daughter cells, it is not like that there is no son cell or daughter cell. Daughter cells are used by the scientists initially, and hence it is being used now also. Okay, so there is no such concept of son cell and daughter cell. Okay, the second point here is if you see sexual reproduction, the offsprings are similar. As I said in my earlier video also, similar means there is some difference between you and your parents. We reproduce sexually. So there is some difference between we and our parents. So we are similar, though we look similar, there is some difference. Whereas in asexual reproduction, offsprings are identical. Identical means exactly the same. Okay. The third point here is since offsprings are similar, not exactly the same to their parents, there is some variations in them. Okay, there is some variation between you and your parents. So that is variations are important for survival in changing environmental conditions. I discussed in the first session of this topic reproduction also. So why variations are important? Because if there is variation in a particular species, that particular species will be able to adapt to the changing environmental conditions, and it will increase the chances of survival, right? So sexual reproduction leads to more variations, whereas there is no variation in asexual reproduction. Why there is no difference? Because the offspring is exactly similar to its parents. Last point here says this type of sexual reproduction takes place in multicellular eukaryotic organisms. Okay, complex multicellular eukaryotic organisms, you can say. There are some eukaryotic organisms which are multicellular, which undergo the process of sexual reproduction. But here, asexual reproduction takes place in complex organisms like humans, birds, basically you can say mammals. Okay, so remember, sexual reproduction takes place in complex multicellular eukaryotic organisms, whereas asexual reproduction takes place in prokaryotic, and prokaryotic means the primitive cells, the older cells like bacteria, then you can say viruses that reproduces asexually. They do not require two things. And simple multicellular organisms, eukaryotic organisms like you can say paramecium, euglena, they also reproduce asexually, right? So examples are very important when you write about differentiation. Okay, when you write any differentiation, see to it that there are examples. So once again, there are two types of reproduction: sexual, asexual. Sexual reproduction, two parents; asexual reproduction, one parent is required. Offsprings are similar, not exactly the same. Whereas in asexual reproduction, offsprings are identical. If they are similar, what is an advantage? It leads to variations, and variations are important for evolution or survival of species, right? Asexual reproduction, there is no variations, and finally you have to give examples. The next question which comes here is, out of these two types of reproduction, which is more advantageous? Okay, here it is said that sexual reproduction has more advantages over asexual reproduction. The only importance here is it leads to variations. And why variations are important? Because it leads to evolution and survival of species. So why sexual reproduction has more advantage? Because the offsprings are produced are similar, not identical, which leads to variations, and variations are important for survival. In the next session, we are going to discuss about different methods of asexual reproduction. It is not that there is only one method, one asexual reproduction or one sexual reproduction. There are different methods like budding, fragmentation, then you can say regeneration, etc., which comes under asexual reproduction. Whereas sexual reproduction, you have male reproductive system, female reproductive system, and so on. So in the next session, we are going to discuss that. Thank you for watching.